Hey, do you want to hear a story? Tonight, dear listeners, we bring you 9 tales told by their authors. Tales guaranteed to chill your bones and warm your heart, to open your mind and empower your spirit. Stories spread our wisdom. They open our minds, give wing to our imagination, and shapes to our fears. And storytellers are the cartographers of that collective subconscious. They show us where the magical glens are, the hazy borders of the human psyche. And here, there be monsters. But tonight, we 9 have come together to do something more, to offer aid to one of our own in her time of need. 9 authors, 9 minds, 9 maps of 9 worlds. One goal: help Solosia. We hope you enjoy the stories, and if you do, please find it in your hearts to find it in your pockets, and click the PayPal link in the description below. I'm Ann Sullivan. Welcome to a night of mystery and magic. A timid girl with a gift, an elite class of powerful women. Will Laurel discover that her gift is no gift at all? For our first tale, Inez Malikova reads from her upcoming gothic fantasy novel, A Viper in the Deck.
Part 1. La Potenza del Pan. For all I have endured, the first stirrings of my intuition, a proud white rose unfolding beneath my sternum, followed by my lessons, merciless lessons, bitter as my first sip of the tea my sister Damaka called Vendrake. I am still haunted by the whispers, echoing through the stone corridors of the Academia. Ah, night spirits, through your relentless chiding, I swear by only one truth. There is power in bread. It is a lesson I learned from my papa when I was 8 years of age, long before I passed beyond the spires and alveolate walls of the Academia into the tutelage of the headmistress. Though my mind still struggles to hold memories, I am able to keep his words in my heart, reach into a hidden pocket of my mind and shine them with the heel of my hand until they glow in my palm. I remember them from the last morning I awoke in my home before I was sent to the Academia, a cocoon of quilts holding me like a cherub's arms, an hour before the sun washed the eastern wall of our tenuta. I planted my toes first on the cold wooden planks of my bedroom, the scent of jasmine blooms still wafting across my terrace, billowing into my room with the final breaths of night. Rubbing my eyes, I rose slowly, instinctually reaching to my bedpost for my bonnet. I brushed my fingers through my curls, tying my headpiece loosely over my scalp while the timbre of Papa's voice rumbled through the floorboards. The deep thrum of his hymn guided me downstairs, across tired wooden steps groaning under my weight, punctuating his song with an uncanny, off-pitch accompaniment to his strong voice. I silenced my toes on the plush carpet at the bottom of the stairs, pausing for a moment to hold their warmth in the soles of my feet. Ah, the strange morning song! It was our ritual, a hidden prayer spoken between the rise of the sun and the fall of the stars. A prayer that was not meant to be, much like the pairing of Mama and Papa. How peculiar of a marriage, an additus of the order, taking a Damaka wife, producing me, a sole Damaka daughter, climbing downstairs in the dark to stand side by side in the kitchen with her papa, kneading dough to make piandia. In the tongue of the Damaka, piandia translated to daily bread, but in my papa's hymn, it was the bread of life, that which sustained the Adatai who came before him as they traversed the Black Mountains in the western region during the bitter chill of winter. I watched locks of my papa's dark hair fall across the creases of his forehead, his hands toiling quickly as he sang of the bread that filled his ancestors' stomachs and souls during their pilgrimage to the mountains. My eyes still bleary from sleep, I cracked an egg in my hands, massaging it into a pile of flour. My lips vibrated with my papa's, and we worked together until light spilled through the small glass window above our counter, scattering prisms of color across our hands, alighting pots and pans with bursts of red and gold. We finished our kneading, rolling the dough flat and sliding it into the large hearth seated in the corner of the kitchen. While we awaited the pleasant scent of dough browning into bread, Papa scooped me into his arms and held me against his apron, dusting my cheek with flour. Blessed Laurel, never forget la potenza del pan. While this is a peculiar lesson to my sister Damaka, it is one I have carried since this day. I am pulled from this memory, snapped back into early autumn's eve by a sharp burst of wind chilling my cheek. I am in my 18th year of age, situated in a carriage with my headmistress and 3 of my sister Damaka, 3 who, like myself, have blossomed to marriage age. We have traded our short, girlish gowns for skirts as thick as drapes that drag on the floor, which sit atop hoops and petticoats that mold us into new shapes. The bare flesh of our bosoms, too, has been hidden under stays and laces shrouded beneath our blouses, which we must tighten around our ribs each morning before meeting the headmistress under the pergolas of the Academia's atrium. The quiet rattle of wheels on stone carries us away from the Academia. I bow my head and stare at my skirts, rubbing my thumb against a silken hem. Though they speak in hushed voices, I hear the persiflage of my sister Damaka seated across from me. Yvette Myelin, with her plump red lips and bright locks, and Riognache Cortel, a woman with a dramatic juxtaposition of auburn hair and blue eyes, whose family is the founder of Cortelion, the capital city of the Région de Faustine, our destination on this day. Our travel carriage veers to the left, and another frigid gust of wind pricks at my cheek. I draw my cheek to my shoulder, frowning at the faulty window. It was not I who the headmistress ordered to be seated here. Knowing what I am among the Damaka, I am the last person who should be seated by the carriage door. Amid the clatter of hooves and the steady roll of wheels, Yvette and Riognache whisper of how I might twist the door open and throw myself upon the rocks, spoiling their travels. I feel a squeeze of my hand, and I am greeted by the dark curls and gray eyes of my sister Damaka seated beside me, Suzette d'Esparza. My lips pull into a small smile, and I squeeze Suzette's hand in reassurance. She whispers to me, her voice dark and calming like my papa's. Be still, Charissima. We are approaching the end of our journey. Among the Damaka, Suzette is my oldest friend, my confidant. Her particular class in the Damaka aside, Suzette is everything that my mother had wished I could be, a striking woman with sharp eyes and satin-like locks that float in loose, tempered curls that frame her ivory skin. Suzette had originally been seated in my place, but she frowned at our arrangement as our trip began, holding her arms to her chest and adjusting her coat. I had heard her plea before she spoke it, and I threaded my fingers through hers. With a quick flash of her tongue, she easily arranged the switch with our headmistress. She had blamed the thickness of her coat, and though we both wore wool over our shoulders, the headmistress nodded her approval, and I bore the cold for Suzette. The last rays of sunlight glint from the hematite brooch fastened to Suzette's lapel. Her garments fit her flawlessly, her blouse smooth, even atop her corset, her coat crisp and unspoiled despite the length of our trip. I had believed the change in our garments had been our final lesson in the Dameca, for it was so for my mamma and for her mother before me. Mamma spoke fondly of this ritual, letting me trace my hands along the thin boning of her corset and tie her petticoats at my waist when I was a child. I had flounced around her bedchamber, twisting my hips to rustle the hoops around my torso and legs, pretending to be a lady of the Courtelion, as she was destined to be before her union with my papa. Courtelion, child, is where all Dameca are fated to dwell, my mother had once told me. Then why not you, mamma? I asked. Why did you choose to live in the Localita de Fior? Mamma's thin, patient lips curved up into a pale smile. It was my choice, child. Fate and choice. Two wheels, always moving in circles, one clockwise and the other counter. Mamma bore a serpent on her wrist to represent each. In the tradition of the Dameca, she was a Fortuna, a woman who could bend fate with a slight shift of her wrist. I was a reflection of Mamma, the once great Claire d'Arbenvale. Her eyes turned from moss to emerald in the sunlight, and long caramel-colored waves of hair cascaded past her shoulders, locks the color of a wheat field, glossed with a coat of dew. She was a petite woman who measured shorter than Papa by a head, and a frail creature, with a pallor to her skin like a gardenia freshly shorn from the bush. While her face was lean, with cheeks sculpted like marble, I had inherited the rotund features of my father's face. And among the Dameca, I am a lunaire.
I hope you enjoyed our first story. If you did, please click the PayPal link in the description below to help our friend Celosia. Now on to our second tale. Lies of magical prophecy and whispers of dark magic surround Aislinn when she finds herself in the realm of Hallervania. She must learn to have faith in herself to restore the elemental magic to light. Finn O'Malley reads from Keeper of Elements.
The early hour made the skyway quiet, but people still headed into work. Men, women, old and young, all walking with a silent determination of their path in this world. Their biggest worry might be a project due today or child's baseball game after school, their dying mother in the hospital down the street. Then there was me. Powerful elemental badass, the amulet swinging at my chest, holding half the cosmic magical power gifted to our world, and no one knew. No one had a freaking clue. I wondered what would happen if they did know. They couldn't handle it. Not really. Startled, I turned to the source of the voice. The White Witch. Hello? My mind in hyperdrive as I glanced around. No, I shouldn't be here, she answered the question I'd yet to formulate. I am because it is deemed so. Her voice, clear and loud. A girl walking nearby peered from the corner of her eye, giving us a strange look. The witch's appearance odd in my realm and downtown Minneapolis. with the white velvet cloak draped across her shoulders, held tight by a brooch of red firestones. The dress beneath hung to her feet, which were bare. At least she didn't have the hood of the cloak overhead, but people would still stare, mostly because the witch was stunning. Special privileges, you might say, she answered again before I asked, her face inquisitive as she admired her surroundings. First time? To this realm, yes. It is very strange. Her eyebrows furrowed together, making me want to laugh. I could relate. A man scrolling on his phone nearly ran into the witch. "Excuse me," he snipped, giving a half glance up, until he caught her eyes. He stumbled to a stop, dumbfounded before her, mouth slightly agape. Rolling my eyes, I tugged on her arm, pulling her forward past him. As I peered back, he watched us with the same stupid expression on his face, and I shook my head in annoyance. What an odd man. You have no idea. Come on, Starbucks is just up here. Starbucks? Rapidly blinking at her, the all-knowing white witch stumped over Starbucks. My greatest moment. I evil-eyed the one person in line ahead of us, while the witch stood in awe, gawking at the blackboard hanging from the ceiling and the complicated espresso machines. What in the heavens? Oh, wait. It is heaven. She gave me an odd look. Then Margot's eyes widened upon seeing me. Aslan, where on earth have you been? Her hands slapped down on the countertop. She has been in another realm, of course, the witch replied before I could. Margot, taken aback by the witch's appearance, investigated with curious eyes. I thought you died. It's been months. Teeth grabbing the bottom of my lip. I forgot about that. Time tended to be annoying when you didn't participate in it. Yeah, I was out of town for a while, a work trip, and then some family stuff came up. I sounded like an evasive asshat. Oh, okay, well, I'm glad you're back, she smiled, her hair shivering with enthusiasm. It was pink now, bright bubblegum pink. She probably consumed 5 or 6 shots already. What can I get for you and your friend? My mouth pulled at the corners. Well, 2 double-shot vanilla lattes. One's for Amy, so you know how she likes it. A caramel macchiato for my friend here. And me. Something strong. I think it's a revolver kind of day. Margot tilted her head as she added to my order, eyebrow raised at my devil coffee. She, of course, had no idea how much I earned the damn drink. All venti? I nodded. You got it, darling. I handed her my card, which drew more odd glances from the witch. Leaving the counter, I sat at one of the small tables. We have to wait? Well, yeah, they need to make it. Her eyes digested this new information. Unfortunately, we can't snap our fingers and make things happen. This is uncomfortable. She pulled out a chair to sit. I snorted a half laugh. Why are you here? Well, to set up a meeting. Her mouth turned upward and my eyebrows followed. Via the next element. No rest for the wicked. Hey, do you mind if we get a picture? 2 guys interrupted at the edge of our table, one with his phone out, pleading with the witch. What? I turned, taking in their colorful chucks, zip hoodies, and oogling eyes. Yeah, she's perfect. You guys going to Comic-Con? Dude, she looks just like her, the one not holding the phone said. I peered up. What was on his t-shirt? Yep, a teddy bear with a pom-pom coming out of his head. Did you just call me dude? I asked, my question disregarded over the witch's response. Look like who, my darling? Her sing-song voice of distant realms danced through the air. The white mage in Final Fantasy XIV? Seriously, just like her. His head bobbing in excitement. This one's bright red shirt had a large skinny chicken on it. My eyebrows traveled deep into the creases of my forehead. I would never understand the gaming world. Ever. The witch seemed entertained. And what is a picture? Yeah, I want to post it on my Instagram. We're headed over to the convention center later. This is bomb. They hovered closer, moving around her shoulders, chicken t-shirt holding his phone out in traditional selfie standards. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered under my breath. The witch, intrigued upon seeing her reflection in the camera, ice blue eyes shimmering, and I wondered how that would show up in the picture. They would probably assume she wore contacts, I hoped. This white mage, who is she? She asked them, their eyes blinking, unsure how to answer. If we were weirding out the gamers, we were walking a dangerous road. She's kidding. I cut the awkwardness with a half laugh. Laughter bubbled out of them and I let out a sigh of relief. Thanks, you're the best. You look great, by the way. They walked off, faces glued to the phone, a certain giddiness in their step. What is Instagram? She asked. Taking a moment to answer, I acknowledged everyone around us, glued to their phones, the games and social media apps. I was one of those people, consumed by the absurd non-reality of the internet. The fleeting thought of posting a picture of the amulet passed through my mind. Hashtag, halfway there. Hashtag, only 2 more to go. Hashtag, keeper of elements. I tried to hold back my laughter as Mario handed us our coffees, setting the carrier of lattes on the table. It's good to see you, and I'm glad you're still alive. See you later. Oh, and tell Amy hey. Margot's hand settled on my shoulder as I nodded at her. Was it bad my friends were constantly concerned about my health and safety? And she had no idea of the imminent danger I constantly found myself in. The witch picked up her cup, bringing it to her nose for a speculative smell. The question of Instagram forgotten. Eyes sparkling with her inhale, I grinned in return, urging her to drink. She took a tentative sip, and her face told me I transcended the realms with the gift of coffee. Oh, this is delightful, and well worth that unearthly wait. Satisfaction melted down her face. I took several gulps of my revolver, savoring the bittersweet love of 6 shots of espresso. Pushing in the chair, I began the walk back to my apartment.
Have you ever been in love? Was it true love? Did you find it in 30 dates or less? In our next story, there is a website that guarantees exactly that. True love in 30 dates or less. And Lisa is about to try it out. How bad could it be? Christine Hecker reads from 30 Dates or Less.
Just as she turned a page of her book, a guy walking in caught Lisa's attention. Unkempt would be putting it kindly. She couldn't tell what color his shoes were supposed to be. His pants looked stiff with dirt. and she would have sworn his shirt was puffing dust clouds, just like that kid in the Peanuts comic. His hair was almost dripping with grease. Just seeing it made her own head itch. Man, I'm glad I'm not dating him, she thought to herself. I can't imagine getting close enough to talk, much less close enough to kiss. Which made her wonder if this guy brushed his teeth. Then he turned and smiled at her. He had a kind smile, and adorable crinkles around his eyes. Danny Boy's profile picture popped into her head as he approached her, and she realized this might be her date. Hi there, I'm Dan. You're Lisa, right? Yep, I'm Lisa. Nice to meet you, Dan. She barely resisted wrinkling her nose at the gross dirt smell that wafted around her as he sat down. She didn't know how long she could tolerate it and wished she had picked a place with outdoor seating. So you came right from work? He asked once he was settled into his chair. Something to do with insurance, right? Yeah, I'm an insurance underwriter just up the road. My sister used to work for an insurance agent. You work on the company side of that, right? Yes, I do, Lisa said, surprised because most people had no idea what an insurance underwriter was. Do you like it? He asked, sipping his coffee. Lisa would have been ashamed to admit she was surprised he could carry on a conversation, and seemed reasonably intelligent. Talk about judging a book by its cover. I like it well enough. It's tough some days. I'm sure you heard stories from your sister. Mostly we heard about the people who wanted exceptions made for them. Yep, I've had plenty of those, Lisa replied. My favorites are the people who want a discount just because, she said, using air quotes. But what about you? What do you do? What do I do? A better question might be, what don't I do? Lisa raised her brows. I'm a jack of all trades. I manage construction projects for contractors, a couple projects I've invested in with a friend, and of course for friends at my church. How do you have time to date? She asked more bluntly than she intended. Lisa felt her neck flush, but Dan just chuckled. Well, I realized a couple months ago that I was kind of lonely and tired of coming home to an empty house. Lisa nodded, empathizing with the feeling. So I asked around if any friends knew any nice, single, churchy girls, but no one did. So I bought a laptop combo tablet thing and found a few places with free Wi-Fi. Then I looked up a dating site one of my friends had suggested. So you don't have internet at home? Lisa asked in surprise. Nope. I'm not home enough to justify the expense. Lisa nodded, more as acknowledgement than understanding. Not having internet at home was completely foreign to her. That explains why it took you a few days to answer some of my emails, she teased. Yeah, between having to find both the time and a place to get online, it did take longer than I would have liked to respond. Well, it didn't bother me or anything, Lisa smiled. I figure everybody's busy and online dating emails aren't always the top priority, she laughed. Hard as that may be for some people to believe. Yeah, people can have some weird priorities sometimes. I know I have some priorities that people think are weird. Like what? Lisa asked, curious what his priorities were. Well, like my house. What about your house would be a weird priority? I built it with my own hands. Lisa's eyebrows shot up. All of it? He held his hands out to her, and she could see his calluses. The house isn't very big, but it's big enough for me. How big is not very big? Lisa asked, eyes squinting with suspicion. Less than 500 square feet. Lisa's eyebrows shot back up. 500 square feet? Yep, he answered proudly. Enough space for a camping stove, a mini fridge, a bed, and a couch. He paused, grinning like a kid. And the couch is in front of a fantastic fireplace I built from stones I personally pulled from the ground when I dug the foundation. How big is the bed? Lisa's snarky alter ego blurted out. As soon as the words were out, she realized how it sounded. I mean, is it even big enough for another person? Realizing that sounded worse, she tried again. What I mean is, you're dating. She paused for a breath. So obviously you're looking for a partner. Do you even have enough physical space to add someone to your life? The bed is actually a king-size bed, he answered a bit defensively. I'm pretty tall, so I wanted a bed I could stretch out on after a hard day. Lisa nodded, taking a sip of her coffee. I work hard, but I do want my body to last for a long time, he continued. So I know I need to take care of it. Lisa wondered what taking care of his body meant as she noticed that smell again. One of my other priorities is water conservation. He returned to the previous topic. 100 years ago, there were no documented allergies, no real lotions, no documented skin issues. His voice was getting increasingly intense. So many modern problems started when we developed indoor plumbing and installed it absolutely everywhere. Lisa stared in disbelief. Don't get me wrong, he continued. I have a well on my property, and I use water in the outhouse every few days if I think it needs it, but I don't shower. I just wipe myself down from a rain barrel I have next to the house. I wipe down my clothes every few days or go swimming in my pond while I'm still wearing them. But I don't use any soap, he ended, emphatically shaking his head. I don't want to put anything unnatural in the environment if I can help it. Lisa's face had frozen in shock. He watched her a moment. I take it from the look on your face that this sounds... He paused as if looking for the right phrase. Far-fetched. Lisa realized her mouth was gaping open. She closed it as she nodded, not knowing what to say. So, I don't think this is going to work for me. His voice had lost its intensity. Now he just sounded sad. She blinked a couple times and shook her head as she processed everything he'd said. I mean, you seem like a nice lady and everything, but to be honest, he wrinkled his nose. I can smell that you probably showered this morning. Yeah. Lisa didn't know what else to say. Dan pushed his chair back from the table. How about we agree this isn't going to work and go our separate ways? Lisa thought for just a second, realizing he was 100% right. There was no scenario, short of total world collapse, where she would willingly agree to never taking another shower. Clearly that was a hard stop for him. Yeah, that makes sense, she agreed, feeling like she was waking from a bad dream. Okay, well, good luck to you. He put his hand out to shake hands. Good luck, she said as he turned and left the cafe. Lisa sat still, letting her brain process what had just happened. She didn't quite know what to think about how the date had gone overall, not to mention how it had finished up.
I truly hope you've enjoyed our show so far. Please don't forget to click on the PayPal link in the description below and donate money to our friend, Celosia. Now, on to our next story. Lady Ashana has to decide if she'll obey her father's wishes and marry the man he's chosen for her, or make her own path, choosing the freedom she desires over duty to her family. Ladies and gentlemen, reading from her upcoming novel, Out of the Ashes, the reason we've come together tonight, Celosia Crane.
The winter winds whipped around the city walls, shrieking into nooks and crannies as though trying to force their way through the stone blocks that made up the ramparts surrounding the city. Standing on the wall facing southwest, I glanced backward over my shoulder toward the castle, before turning once more toward the great empty plain that began on the farther riverbank. It was cold, bitterly so. The icy granite blocks beneath my fingers were doing their best to suck all of the movement out of my hands, even as I clutched them tightly. Hot tears filled my eyes. Lifting my gaze back to the empty plain, the tears distorted my vision until they spilled down my cheeks, their heat quickly cooled by the icy touch of the falling snow. I was alone on the wall, and for once I was glad of it. Clouds scudded across the sky, causing minute snow showers, then vanishing. Their absence filling the sky with the bright, cold light of the winter sun. Before me, the plains sparkled in the bright light, while the wind tugged at my hair and cloak, tearing strands out of my braid and tossing them in front of my face, causing the bleakness of the world around me to be momentarily filled with color. Red flashes against the white snow. The rampart had become a place of solitude for me, a different kind of solitude than what I experienced at the castle. That wasn't solitude, that was isolation. Here, there was no one to condemn my tears. You've been gone for 4 years, Mama. I can't believe that time has gone by so swiftly. I opened my eyes, swiping angrily at my cheeks, trying to dry the tears that chapped my skin. You left me in the wintertime. I could not even light candles to show you the way home. I choked back the sob that hovered in my throat. Here was not the place to fall apart completely. My whole body shuddered as a hard, cold gust of wind blew past me. Pulling my fur-lined hood back up over my head, I buried my frozen fingers in the pockets inside my cloak. A cloud covered the sun again, changing the plain before me into a gray wasteland. I stared down at the thickly encrusted ice that covered Blaze River. Everything around me seemed dead, frozen and lifeless. Icy snowflakes whistled through the air. The cloud moved quickly, and the sun came back with its pale yellow stare, reigniting the diamonds that encrusted every surface. As the snow sparkled, the birds began calling tentatively to each other in the bushes that clung to the embankment at the base of the wall. And it was as if Mama was right there beside me. My lips were moving almost without conscious effort. But even the river only sleeps. It is not truly dead. Underneath that thick layer of ice, the water continues to move slowly and inextricably toward the sea. Moving slowly, I walked along the rampart until I came to the narrow flight of stairs that led down into the first ring of the city. As I moved, the wind kicked up, rising into a veritable howl, and I froze. Something teased at the corner of my hearing. I stood looking up into the sky, trying to beat the hope and excitement back down into the dark cavity where I hid them. I heard nothing more. The wind had suddenly dropped to a mere breeze, but I could have sworn I heard a voice. I looked around once more, hoping to see or hear something. Anything, and as I did so, my eyes focused on the castle again, and I clutched my cloak tightly around my body. At the bottom of the stairs, I was completely protected from the wind, and the lack of it left me suddenly lightheaded. Breathing slowly, I closed my eyes for a moment as the heaviness descended on me once again. The street beneath my feet was packed earth, and all around me crowds of people were entering by the gate. I slipped into the mass they created, grateful for the moment of anonymity, staying with them until they reached the gate into the second ring of the city. Slipping out of the crowd, I stood with my back toward the wall. I could continue with the crowd of people to the large square where the market set up its stalls. This would bring me back to the castle by the quickest and most direct route. My hands gripped my cloak tightly, trembling as a hollow and yet hard knot sank its hold into my chest, causing my breath to come in shallow gasps. My feet moved backward a few steps until I bumped into the wall. Turning my gaze away from that route, I drew in several slow breaths. The tight grip in my chest eased enough that my breathing returned to normal. Though the hard pit remained in my stomach, I was once more in control. The road to the left of me curved along the second curtain wall that separated the first circle of the city from the second. It housed the more genteel shops and private homes. Only a few members of the throng I had joined at the gate had broken off to follow this route. On either side of me rose buildings made out of timber and plaster. They housed shops offering everything from handmade lace from the Rashma Islands to beeswax candles, fabric, books, tanned leather goods, swords, weapons and armor from the Queen's personally appointed metallurgist, Master Guinevere, and armorer, Master Sinead. As the street curved to follow the wall, I looked up and watched the temple draw nearer. I had to fight to keep my feet moving steadily, instead of picking up my skirts in my hands and running like a child towards my refuge. I stopped when I reached the main gate that led into the temple compound. Stepping through onto the smooth gravel path, the peace of this place descended over me and settled about my shoulders, refusing to allow any other anxieties to surface, at least for as long as I remained. I let my feet guide me down the path toward the sound of water in the purification fountain. Picking up the dipper, I proceeded through the motions of the ritual before continuing on to the temple. I loved the temple because of the peace and the respect that filled its grounds. As I knelt in the low-beamed hall, I found my mind dwelling on the whispered voice that followed my days and the vivid dreams that haunted my nights. Voices brought to me by the wind, with no speaker in sight, spoken in languages I'd never heard, though sometimes I thought I recognized. And dreams of a strange tree-like creature who felt incredibly familiar and strangely safe. Often I saw my mother in these dreams, and together the three of us would wander the woodland paths. Today, the memories were more bitter than ever. Slowly, my thoughts returned from their wanderings, and I found myself alone in the meditation hall.
Delaney Murphy is the devil's daughter. To protect the world, she's left everything behind to live in solitude. but a familiar pattern in a string of murders draws her out, unleashing a threat that may only be defeated by Delaney becoming what she fears most. Here's K.A. Fox reading from her upcoming novel, The Devil's Own.
Knowing I had to face the harsh facts, I whispered to myself, "You have to go back out there. Hiding won't do any good now." I bit my lip, straightened my shoulders, and stepped out into the hallway. Strong hands grabbed me, pushing me up against a wall. I felt like everything slowed down, moving forward in minute increments. I dazedly recognized Detective Bishop, beautiful eyes fierce as he looked down at me. He glanced over his shoulder, toward the seating area, his fingers just grazing the skin over my collarbone. The small, accidental touch shocked me, and it felt so good. I gasped, pulling the detective's attention back to me, the dark centers of his eyes eating up the bright blue surrounding them. He leaned in, his tongue wetting his lips, but I could feel restraint thrumming in him, holding him back. I heard the whisper leave my mouth before the thought had fully formed in my mind. One word. Yes. A triumphant smile flared on his face before his lips crashed down on mine, demanding. My mouth opened in surprise, letting his tongue in. I couldn't move, and the kiss slowed down, an exploration. When I didn't resist, his hands moved into my hair, tangling his fingers in the curls. I leaned into that touch. Heat pulsed through me, and desire rose up fiercely, my stomach fluttering. I wanted more, so much more. Suddenly, I was kissing him back, tasting him the way he had tasted me. He moaned softly, and his hands moved from my hair to cup my face and then down to my arms, holding me firmly between him and the wall. As he broke away to take a shaky breath, sense began to force its way back into my brain, reminding me I shouldn't be doing this. I pushed at his arms, trying to break the connection. I was in danger of falling, losing myself in how wonderful it felt to be held, to be desired. But I couldn't let it happen. I had to stop this. I ground the heel of my shoe into the top of Torrance' foot. He flinched away, and I was able to step out of his embrace, putting some much-needed distance between us. His gaze was unfocused, the blue of his eyes replaced by a deep darkness. A soft grin spread across his face as he said, "You taste good, sweet with a little spice, hot." He closed his eyes, swaying like he was drunk, and when he opened them again, he said, "So good." Need layered those simple words, and he took a step toward me, like he wanted to taste me again. I held my hands up, backing away from him, down the hall to where the tables were. I needed to maintain a healthy amount of space between us. "We shouldn't have done that," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm sorry. I was just waiting out here to make sure you were okay." He pleaded with me, each step he took bringing him closer. His voice was almost a purr, silky against my ears, and I fought to resist its pull. My body desperately wanted me to close the gap between us, to let him kiss me again and see if it felt as good a third time, and a fourth, and on and on. "No, Torrin, please, we can't." He kept talking, the rhythm of his voice pulling me in. "When you left the table, I saw this guy. I think he was looking for you. When you came out..." He stopped, confused. Shaking his head, clearing it, he continued, "I'm not sure why I did that, but it felt good. Perfect." The panic in me rose to the top when I felt heat between us snap into being again as he reached for me. I slipped away from him. "You don't understand what just happened." "I understand exactly what we did. I kissed you. We liked it." He kept coming toward me, daring me to deny it. "That's not what I meant. You can't just kiss me. This is a problem." I knew I was babbling, fear making me ramble. "I have to go." He reached out again. Stay, please, or I'll come with you. If that man I saw is following you, I can't let you go alone. I dodged his grasping hand. No, you need to go back to wherever it is you're staying. Take a very cold shower, get some sleep. Do anything but think about what happened here. But Delaney, he started. I cut him off with a wave of my hand and a quick shake of my head. Go! Now! I turned and ran through the cafe, past the chairs and the customers ordering. Out in the cold air, I realized I'd left my coat behind. But I wasn't going back, not with Torrin still there, high on what we'd done. I'd used my magic around him from the first time we met, and he'd followed me home. Things had just gone from bad to worse. We needed to stay away from each other. This was yet another problem for me to fix. Angus was going to be so completely pissed. My hands were shaking when I made it to my car, the cold chill of panic taking me over. My heart hammered in my head, and I kept hearing Torrin's voice, the soft way he said my name. I jerked the transmission into reverse and slammed my foot down on the gas, ignoring the high whine of the engine at my rough treatment. Horns sounded behind me, but I didn't spare a look back. I had to get out of there. I spotted Torrin, following the path I'd taken to my parking space as if he was a born tracker. My feet jammed down hard on the clutch and brake, the tires protesting even as I shifted violently into first gear. The tires spun as I dumped the clutch and mashed the gas again. The back end slid to the right before it hooked up and my Hellcat jumped forward, racing toward my escape. I didn't look back until I was surrounded by empty countryside. No cars were visible in my rear view, and I tried to slow my breathing. Tears had fallen as I drove, leaving salty tracks down my face. I couldn't go home like this. I saw the turn off to an old gravel road up ahead and took it, following it away from the highway until it bent around the curve of a hill, and I was hidden from view by the slope and a stand of trees. I pulled off to the side and stopped, resting my head on the wheel. Silent sobs shook me, and I gave in, the memories of the last time I'd been kissed sweeping over and pulling me under. Back into that night, 2 years ago. Angus had come to me after my prom had erupted into mayhem at the sudden emergence of my magic. He'd given me a choice. All of it? All that happened because of you? I faced him, tears blurring my vision. I didn't want to believe what he'd just told me, but gut deep, I knew every word had been true. The screams from the gym still echoed in my ears. No, Delaney. It happened because of you. Angus gave me a sad smile. The sins of the father and all that. The room swam as I fought to catch a breath. My mother, my friends, my future, everything I thought my life would be was slipping away, and there was nothing I could do. You have to make a choice. This time his voice was softer. Stay or go. You have to decide. I forced myself to swallow against the bile in my throat. That's not a choice, Dad. But you already knew that. He didn't say anything, but he didn't look away. No matter what, he would be my witness. Go. It's the right thing to do. As I choked the words out, an agonized scream rose up from the hall right outside the room I'd hidden in, as if somehow my answer had penetrated the walls. I recognized the voice that called my name, pleading with me not to leave as a heavy fist battered the door I'd locked behind me. My heart twisted in my chest, a pain I almost welcomed. But the decision was made. I nodded at my father, more strength in my answer this time. I have to go. That's my girl. He came to stand behind me, strong arms wrapping around and pulling me close, snuggling me up against his heart. The scent of brimstone stung my nose, even as it comforted me. Then he took one step back, and we fell, together, into hell.
Imagine a world at the end of a 100-year war. A world where modern technology lives side by side with Victorian ideals. Now come into that world. Follow Delancey Scott, a wealthy and jaded dandy, as he tries to correct the legacy of his hated father while trying to survive the dangerous streets of London in an even more dangerous upper-class society. Here's, well, me, N. Sullivan, reading from my upcoming novel, Glitch. His Chelsea boots glistened with the leftover spittle of raindrops, their polished black leather reflecting the LED street lamps that sprayed shadows across the cobbled streets of the East End in the dreary London afternoon. His black umbrella did little to keep the persistent mist from collecting in tiny droplets all over his dark purple brocade frock coat. They collected into rivulets that dripped consistently off the hem at his knees, leaving trails of black on his dark gray trousers. As he approached the grim gray building in the narrow street, he set his monocle in place. He didn't really need to. He had been there too many times to count since his father's death. But the digital overlay in the green-tinted glass was comforting to him. The floating holographic shingles superimposed by augmented reality over the soot-stained doorways reminded him of happier times in his childhood, when he would play in these offices while his father settled some matter of business or another with the lawyers who plied their dirty trade within the shuttered and soundproof back rooms. He crossed the dim street, dodging self-propelled carriages and milling throngs making their way to and from locations unknown and unnecessary to know. He tapped on the door with the head of his walking stick, careful to press it against the small brass circle in the middle of the knocker that read the scanner chip in the head of the cane. A scanner buzzed over his head, reading the topographical map of his face and confirming his identity. Good afternoon, Mr. Scott. Welcome to the law offices of Firestone, Frederick, and Decano. Please come in, a recorded voice said. There was a clicking and clacking, the sliding of bolts and unlocking of locks. The door creaked open a few inches. He closed his umbrella, shaking the water off as he pushed the door open and stepped through. Dropping it in a convenient urn by the door, he removed his black velvet top hat, coated in a thin but complete layer of droplets. The office hadn't changed, he thought, since before the last war at least. The mahogany walls, the dark wood floor of undeterminable origin, worn light with trails and tracks by hundreds of thousands of footsteps over decades. Even the name of the firm, Firestone, Frederick, and Decano, was a holdover from an older age. Both Firestone and Frederick lines had died out. Only a Decano, a distant relative of the founding partner, still operated the business. Though the firm had handled many accounts and represented many illustrious interests, throughout the past 5 decades, their greatest claim to fame had been their fierce defense of his father's interests, legal or otherwise. He made his way down the unnecessarily dim hallway toward the door at the end. He didn't knock, turning the knob and pushing through into the small office of Erasmus Decano. The old man, and he was very much exceedingly old, was sitting behind a large real wood desk speaking aggressively into a telephone. Wisps of gray hair flitted around his head, making their own way in the world regardless of their owner's wishes. His coat had been tossed absently over a nearby chair, leaving him with nothing but waistcoat and shirt sleeves as protection against the unheated room. He may have been a hell of a solicitor, but he was also one hell of a miser. Perhaps that's why Father liked him. Mr. Wethington, the old man nearly screeched into the phone while motioning for Delancey to take a chair. If your client has a problem with the terms of a contract which she willingly signed, then I suggest that she and you meet us in court to dispute those terms. Until then, good day, sir. He hung up the phone with a violent thwack. Was that some issue with my business? Delancey asked. You? Oh no. Tenants at another client's property. They are never satisfied. This one wants overhead lights, that one wants reliable heat. He brushed off their concerns with a wave of his hand. How dare they? Delancey said, dryly. I know you have other places to be, Mr. Scott, Decano said, so I will get to the business at hand. Delancey sighed. And what would that be? Your spending, Mr. Scott. I have been looking over your accounts. Which I told you not to do, Delancey interrupted. I have been looking over your accounts, Decano said, unfazed. And your spending is coming dangerously close to putting a real dent in your income. A real dent, you say? Delancey said, yawning. A real dent in what, exactly? My income from my private overseas holdings, my vast number of real estate properties, the controlling interests I hold in multiple international concerns, including the Bank of England. Oh, and that's not including my income from Scott & Company. Which of those have I managed to nearly put a dent in? Your father didn't create that wealth just for you to squander it, Mr. Scott, Decano said, clearly trying to hold his temper. My father, Delancey said, was a miser and a war profiteer who died hated by nearly every man in the empire, including me. He made that fortune off misery and death, and if I can use that same money to bring some light into the dark world he created for the rest of us, then I think that's the least recompense my family and my company owes. Decano was fuming. Delancey's father had made him rich, helped him build his practice and his reputation as a bulldog for the super rich. Your father was a good man, Decano said, pulling his frail frame slightly out of his chair. A bright light in a dark time who helped to finally bring an end to 100 years of war on the continent after America fell. He did a lot of good in his time on Earth, Decano said. He had clearly been practicing this speech. Good. Yes, I suppose selling weapons to both sides in a war is good. At least for the one doing the selling. Delancey managed a touch of a smile, even though the thought of someone defending his father's legacy made him taste vomit. They had no idea what kind of man he was. And let's be clear, I know full well that he didn't throw his full weight behind the crown until the prosecutors had already made their case against him. I was young, Erasmus, but I wasn't blind, Delancey said. Now, other than me spending more than my dead father would prefer, is there anything else? Nothing I can think of, Decano said. Good. Delancey picked up his top hat off the desk and stood up. Because I have more important things to do today. Delancey turned his back on the old lawyer and pulled his hat down on his head, cocking it to the right with the head of his walking stick. Also, Mr. Decano, he said, pray don't forget that I kept you as my solicitor when my father died to mind my affairs. Don't assume that makes you anything more than an employee. Delancey left Decano fuming in the office and walked back into the lobby. Pulling his umbrella from the urn by the door, he looked back into the lobby. There wasn't even a receptionist. She probably cost too much, or asked for a living wage. No people at all. Just that camera and a robotic voice 5 generations out of date. It was linked to a brand new security matrix. Security was the only thing old Erasmus was willing to spend money on. Delancey opened the door and passed out into the gray daylight, opening his umbrella as he passed the threshold. We're counting on your donations to help our friend Celosia. Please click the PayPal link in the description and donate. Now, what would you do with a taste of your future? When Mia, a struggling writer, has a seemingly chance encounter with a street psychic, she gets exactly that. Be careful what you wish for. Here's Amy Fenster reading from The Valentine House.
Your aura is so beautiful. The woman spoke in a voice as beautiful and polished as her appearance. I've never seen anything quite like it. Mia smiled, unsure what the proper response to that was. "Oh, thank you." "Please sit down," the woman said, gesturing to the seat again. Mia sat. The protest she was about to utter fizzled out of her brain before she even opened her mouth. She was wary, but also curious about where this exchange was headed. She pulled the stroller alongside of her so she could keep a hand on it. "I've never seen you here before," Mia said, glancing about the canopy. It was open, but provided enough privacy that Mia could almost forget that they were in the middle of a bustling park. "I've never actually been here," the psychic answered. "Of course I've been to the park, but I've never set up here. I have a shop on Fifth Avenue, but I was compelled to come here today, and I always listen when my intuition speaks." Mia nodded. "I'm not really prepared for a reading or anything today," she said, trying to get that out of the way. "We're rarely prepared for the things we need when they come to us, though, are we?" she asked with a smile. Mia returned the smile. Despite herself, she felt oddly comfortable with this woman. She was determined to keep her guard up, though. "Today is a special day for you, is it not?" Mia stared at the psychic. "It is," she said, slowly nodding. "A birthday?" she asked. Mia nodded again. She was impressed, but she was determined to give nothing away. "Not yours." "That's right," Mia affirmed. "A child," the psychic continued. "That's also right," Mia said. The psychic smiled serenely, as if she already knew she was right. But maybe she did. That was her job, after all. She was gazing at Mia with a sympathetic expression. "Since it's a special day for you, it's only right that you have a reading," the psychic said, picking up her tarot cards. Mia eyed them. The picture on the front was pretty. It was a glowing full moon reflected on a calm, translucent ocean. She watched as the psychic shuffled them. The water seemed to shimmer as she moved the cards. The effect was almost hypnotic, and Mia found herself entranced by the image of the shimmering water and the moon floating past her. "I do my readings a little differently than others you may have had." Mia nodded and watched as she stopped shuffling the cards and spread them out on the table between them. "Pick 3, and I'll pick 3, she instructed. Mia nodded and let her hand hover over the cards. She waited to feel a pull of some kind. She felt a tingle of energy in her hand and picked up the card. She did that 2 more times, then watched the psychic swiftly pick 3 more cards. She flipped the first one over to reveal the tower. The tall Gothic tower was crumbling. Mia grimaced. That didn't look good. "The crumbling tower looks worse than it is," the psychic said. "It can mean disaster, but in this case, it just means that the old way of things is crumbling. It's a sign of upheaval." Mia nodded, but a tight coil of nervous anticipation had settled in her stomach. The psychic flipped over the next card and smiled. "See? The Wheel of Fortune. Change," she said, studying Mia's face. "A change in career and a move eventually." Mia nodded. She wished. She dreamed of becoming a successful writer and moving into her dream house in her dream neighborhood, but she didn't see that happening anytime soon. "That would be fantastic," she said aloud. The psychic smiled knowingly. "The next card represents you," she said, and turned over the High Priestess. "The High Priestess is a powerful card. You are filled with that power. It's all over your aura." Mia smiled slightly. The heat of an embarrassed blush crept into her cheeks. She wanted to be the High Priestess, but she wasn't. The next card was the Empress. "A mother figure, or 2 actually, will be coming into your life. One of them will seem unlikely, but they will both help you recover things you've lost." Mia looked at the psychic curiously. She only smiled and turned over the next card. "The lovers meet," she said with a light in her eyes. "New love is on the horizon very soon." Mia laughed out loud at that. She shook her head. "I don't think so," she said. "That's not going to happen." "Why?" the psychic asked, but her expression indicated that she already knew that answer, and she just wanted to hear what Mia would say. "Because it's just not," Mia said, oversimplifying the emotions in her head. "I'm too old, and I have no space in my life for a relationship, and there aren't even any men I'd be interested in who would be interested in me." Mia knew she was babbling, but the psychic just watched her serenely and without expression. Then a smile broke through the serenity, and Mia felt as if it added light to the shadowy tent. "You're never too old for love," the psychic said. "You're never too old for anything. Life doesn't work on timelines. Life doesn't end when you reach a certain age. It only ends when it ends." Mia nodded, but she didn't think it was true for her. She had missed the boat on love, and that ship wasn't coming around again. She had made peace with that. She had Waverly, and that was enough. She looked up to see the psychic's eyes fixed on her. A thrill of exhilaration shot through her, as if the psychic could see into her soul and give her all the answers to fix her. But the psychic just flipped over the last card. "The sun," she said with a triumphant smile. "The sun is a symbol of success and celebration. It means that the path you are on will take you to fulfillment." "I don't feel like I'm on a path at all right now," Mia admitted, though in truth she felt like she was on a path. The path was a continuous circle leading nowhere. "Your path is a labyrinth," the psychic said. "It feels like you're walking in a circle, but you're actually on a purposeful journey. It's a spiral, and you're never in the same place twice, even though it may seem like you are." "It certainly does seem like I am," Mia agreed. She looked at her cards. She wanted to believe what they foretold, but she just couldn't see how that was a possibility. The psychic gazed at Mia. She produced 2 crystals seemingly out of nowhere. One looked like a clear quartz crystal to Mia. The other was smoother and was various shades of orange. The psychic held them out to her. "Clear quartz and carnelian," she informed Mia, looking from the crystals to her face. "The quartz helps you manifest anything. People underestimate its power, but it's really an essential. Carnelian is a stone that represents and increases creativity, energy, and courage. I have a feeling you could use it." Mia took them. "Thank you," she said, looking down at the crystals. She used to have a decent collection of crystals, but like so many other things, they had gotten lost over the years. She closed her fingers around them, thinking the power she felt emanating from them must have been her imagination. The psychic smiled at her as if she knew what she was thinking. Surprisingly, this didn't make Mia uncomfortable. In fact, it was quite the opposite. Mia stood and reached for her bag. She felt she needed to give the woman something. The psychic shook her head and waved her away. "No, this was a gift. Just be sure to use the crystals. Make a wish at midnight while you hold them in the moonlight." Mia nodded and positioned herself behind the stroller, ready to go. "Thanks again," she said, and she started walking out of the tent. "Don't worry. The writer's block will soon be a distant memory," she said. Mia froze and turned to look at her. "How?" was all she managed. "Psychic," she replied with a warm smile as she tapped her index finger against her temple.
Can you ever really know what's in someone's mind? We're often surprised by the thoughts of our closest friends, let alone complete strangers. It makes it difficult to know who to trust. When a stranger's car breaks down in front of an isolated farmhouse, he asks for help from the little old lady who lives there. But does he have an ulterior motive? Does she? Charlie Brennan reads from 4 minutes to 9.
Matthias gingerly sat on the clean but worn-out sofa cushion and watched as Esther's wrinkled hands continued working on the scarf. "May I ask who you're making that for?" "Ah, yes. It's for my granddaughter, Chelsea. She's in college, and I thought I'd send her a little care package. Winter will start before you know it." She gazed fondly at the scarf and began moving her needles again. Besides, knitting is an excellent way to keep those joints from stiffening up. "Indeed," Matthias replied, watching as Esther maneuvered the needles and the yarn into a work of art. "She's partial to the color red?" "Ah, yes. It's a bit too flashy for me at this age, but it will complement her lovely dark hair and blue eyes. She looks much like I did when I was young." Matthias's eyes narrowed at the mention of age. Do you ever wonder what it would be like if you never had to age? If you stayed young, the beauty in that wedding photo preserved for all time?" "Oh, young man, don't get fresh with me," she laughed and gave him a weak, playful slap on his shoulder. "You are much too young for an old crow like me." She finished up her knitting and set it aside, then bent forward to sift through her knitting basket. "Well, what can I say? Beauties like you are hard to come by." Matthias offered a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, and watched as she placed the needles in a case. "I say that we should let the young keep the beauty. They need it while they're learning. The rest of us don't need it anymore as we age. Our beauty is on the inside, and many of us are quite inclined to pass both kinds of beauty down to our children and grandchildren so they can become better people than we were. She rifled through the basket a little more and pulled out a skein of chunky pink yarn. Now, where did those go? Matthias frowned slightly in displeasure, then adjusted his face back into a smile as she sat back up. I swear those other needles were around here somewhere, Esther mumbled as she searched around her seat. She then reached into the edge where her seat cushion met the arm of the couch and pulled out 2 enormous wooden knitting needles. There they are. You can't use this kind of yarn at all without larger needles. The smaller ones are useless. Matthias smirked. Why, grandmother, what big knitting needles you have. The better to knit with, my dear, Esther replied. They both laughed, and then Esther began knitting again with the new yarn. Again, Matthias became slightly mesmerized by the process of the needles moving the yarn, creating a new pattern. They sat in silence for a bit. The only sound in the room was the slight tapping of the needles hitting each other. I do think about it. Sometimes, Esther said suddenly. Matthias jumped slightly as her words broke the silence. He composed himself quickly. I'm sorry. Oh, about being young again, not having to worry about breaking a hip, not having to wake up feeling so stiff in the morning, not having my bones ache before a rain. Esther almost threw the words away like they were nothing, yet there was a slight tone to her words that betrayed the weight of her age. What if I told you I had a way to fix that? Matthias said in a silky tone. Are you a doctor? Can you reverse the effects of old age? Esther scoffed. I'll believe it when I see it. Besides, I live off of Social Security. I could hardly afford unnecessary medical procedures. It's not what you think. You won't have to pay a cent, Matthias replied smoothly. It's a secret, though. Want me to tell you? Esther paused her knitting, her needles grasped firmly in each hand, and gave him a doubtful glance. Very well, young man. Tell me your secret. I'll listen. I can't guarantee I'll believe it, but I'll listen. The expression on Matthias's face relaxed into a smirk of triumph. I'll have to whisper it to you, trade secret and all. Can't have just anyone finding out, even if we were in the middle of nowhere. You never know when someone might come around. You like to keep a woman waiting, don't you, young man? She teased back. She tilted her neck to give him better access to her ear. Patience, my dear, Matthias purred. He leaned closer to her ear, his closed mouth smirk turning into a wide grin, elongated canines glinting in the lamplight. He angled his mouth to approach the thin skin that covered the blue veins of her neck, and then stopped. He looked down in shock. A large wooden knitting needle was embedded in his chest. What? Esther leaned forward with a gleam of triumph in her eyes. You thought I didn't know, didn't you? Matthias's eyes widened as he stared at the woman before him. She straightened her spine as she sat, raising herself to her true, more statuesque height. He now saw that there was a strong resemblance to the woman in the wedding photo. He'd been had. Why? He asked, so shocked by his predicament that he didn't know what to do. Why? I've been hunting your kind for decades. It was easier when I was younger, certainly. Younger vampires tend to go after younger prey. They're so superficial, after all. Their inexperience also makes them easier to hunt. The older ones are more careful, though. They know that older blood is richer, so as I aged, my methods changed. Once Henry died, gentle soul as he was, all I had to do was play up the image of the lonely old widow who lives in the country. Your kind began to show up in droves. She rolled her eyes as she took off the fake glasses and set them on a side table. Really, vampires are so predictable.
Nothing worth having in life comes without some pain. Our last story explores that pain as we follow a young girl blessed to be an inflammare, the source of all light and energy in her village. A.R. Coble reads from Inflammare.
It began in my toes, a cuddly warmth turned blazing heat I was sure nobody could survive. I could feel it running through my veins, burning inch by inch, climbing up my body until it would consume. The elder priests tried to prepare me for the varying sensations, but no amount of preparation could ever be enough. Not for this. As the pain grew stronger, I locked my screams inside. They were useless anyhow. No amount of screaming would take away the fire that ravaged through my body. I kept my eyes closed, focused on remaining silent. The crowd was acutely aware that I was experiencing torture. They didn't need to hear about it from me. By the time it reached my heart, the pain was a searing agony. The priests warned me this would happen, that when the kone, a liquid fire, reached my heart, it would feel excruciatingly worse. The heart is a strong muscle, a young priest mused. He was more excited to witness an inflammare ceremony than he had any right to be. It will pump the fire harder and harder through your veins. You will likely feel like you might explode. Yes, that's quite enough of that, the chief priest admonished. This will be frightening enough for our Ignite goddess to be, without adding unproven embellishments. He had set his hand gently on my shoulder. It was meant to be comforting. Unfortunately, the young priest was right. I thought I might explode. Deep, resonating drums formed a circle around me, like a cocoon around a caterpillar, and kept a steady rhythm that tethered me to the reality I craved. A reality with no pain, or less pain. I would have settled for less pain. The cadence of the drums guided me to a new, deeper tether. It led me to my ancestors, the women who'd come before me, those who, like me, had been God-blessed to become the next Ignite goddess and the tribe's source of energy until we burned out. I was assured I would not burn out for hundreds of years yet. Comforting. The torment escalated as the liquid fire continued to pulse through my veins. Every artery and vessel felt like it would combust. It rose up my chest, into my neck. When it reached my ears, I lost all sense of hearing. The crown of my head felt like the beginnings of a volcanic eruption. I thought I would die. No amount of assurance from the elder priests could have convinced me otherwise. The release of fire and energy erupted through my body. If I hadn't already been lying down, I certainly would have fallen gracelessly to the ground in an embarrassing heap. The demanding throb of the drums came roaring back into my ears. They would not cease until I rose from the flower-laden marble table that held me during my transformation. I remained frozen and lit a flame all at once. The pain was now absent, and in its place a new sensation overwhelmed me. I was on fire, but the fire did not consume me. It was as though my body had become one with the flame. Inflammare. I opened my eyes, knowing what to expect, having grown up with our late Ignite goddess, and being surprised by what I saw anyway. A mirror hovered directly over me. I barely recognized myself. My reflection was something of awe. I burned brighter than our late Ignite goddess, but I otherwise had all the same sensuous curves as before, now accentuated by blue and purple flame. I timidly reached my fingers, also aflame, toward my eyes. Violet wildfire danced where my brown irises used to be. I noticed my hair soon after. It still hung like long billowing curtains around my face, but it had come alive with the blaze. My breaths were quick, moving in and out through flared nostrils. Every last inch of me was covered in varying shades of flame. Closing my eyes, I swallowed and focused on calming my breath. I had to get it together if my people were going to accept their new Ignite goddess. I sat up cautiously, hyper-aware that I could set anything remotely flammable on fire just by being in close proximity. The elder priests had assured me that this was to be expected and wouldn't last forever. My body would adapt over time, and I would be able to hug my loved ones again, touch delicate plants and fabrics, anything I'd been able to do before the ceremony without setting anything on fire. I planted my feet firmly on the ground and stood, the drums ceasing at precisely the same time. The hush was eerie, giving me goosebumps, an odd sensation when your body is all heat. My new eyes scanned the crowd for my parents, who were holding each other tightly, my mother clutching a handkerchief to catch her tears. When my eyes found her round brown eyes, she smiled with pride and relief. Her joy resonated with me so deeply that my flames expanded around me. The once eerie silence became one loud and long cheer for me, the tribe's new Ignite goddess. Considering the Inflammari ceremony only happened once every several hundred years, everyone was just as excited about witnessing the Inflammare as they were to have a new Ignite goddess. I am the Ignite goddess. My name is Selosia. Watch me burn.
Alas, the time has come, and we have no more tales to tell tonight. If you haven't yet, please click the PayPal link in the description below and donate to help our friend Selosia. From all the authors and from myself, thank you for coming and thank you for supporting our friend. And until next time, good night.